Hello and welcome back to the Atlantis channel. This is where we dig deep to unearth the treasures of our soul. And I'm so excited today to have one of the people that I got to spend a lot of time with last year. Her name is Meghan. She is a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator and somatic healer. And she works with the company that I received my certification through. So she got to be one of my mentors last year. I spent a lot of time listening to her wisdom, being guided by her in breath. And I'm so excited to have you to the show today, Meghan. How are you?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Dakota. Thank you, thank you. And
Mm,
it's so neat to see the way that you show up in this space and the way that you
mm.
hold conversations with other individuals and just bring really unique spins in it. So I'm so excited for us to have like our time to jam
Yes.
today.
Yes,
Mhm.
me too. Yes, me too. Speaking of unique spins, I see this view of Meghan all the time, and I've always admired all of your plants. I sit here and I just stare at your plants. Have you always been a plant lady?
No, no.
Yeah.
Um, and my parents had like part of our house was a greenhouse. So like it was a part of it, but
What?
like I
Yeah.
did cared none of it. But then I started to love it and like it. I'm glad that you can see the ones that are thriving. There's like a lot in this space where they're like hidden because not so much, but um it feels like it brings life into my space. So
Mm,
I just like the energy of what that brings. And um after it's funny too, and not to immediately go here, but in one of a breathwork session I did ages ago, the facilitator prompted like open your eyes and find something beautiful in your space, and it immediately went to plants. And after that I think of that every time. It's like, oh, what
yeah.
is this life that is in my space that just feels really beautiful all the time, even when they're
Yes.
barely living sometimes.
They're so I am a plant lady too, and there's such a relationship there. Like it's hard to articulate if you haven't experienced it. And I grew up on a farm, so hundreds of acres of fields, but then also like several acres of garden. And so my parents were also very much into this green, and I wasn't there for a long time either. And once I rediscovered that magic of plants, oh, it just like changes the whole house.
One of my neighbors had on their patio this beautiful cactus, and it was
Mm,
tall, so tall. It came up and over the railing. It was so beautiful. And as the season turned here, it just kept staying outside. And like every day I would have a really emotional experience, and it froze and the whole thing died and it just fell apart one by one. And so when you name the relation with it, I was like, it hurt my body. So I wanted
mm,
to just knock on their door and say like, can I have this? Like,
yeah.
can someone take it? Because it's really pretty and I don't want it to die out here. And
Oh,
it's out there still, the little like
oh
exoskeleton of it. It
no.
makes me so sad.
That's so sad. Oh my gosh. Yeah, people have started giving me their plants that aren't thriving. And I'm like, thank you. I'll
I'll
take
take
it
them,
and nurture
please.
it.
I'll nurture you back to
Okay.
health.
This is amazing. And I feel like this is a beautiful transition into the topic that I am so excited to talk to you about. And that is this cyclical living. And then, like, more specifically, cyclical living with the breath. And I think there's so many parallels that we could draw from plants on cyclical
Oh my
living,
gosh.
right?
So much,
Yeah,
so
so
much.
so tell me about like what is cyclical living and how did you get into it?
Yeah, cyclical living is a way of being that incorporates the different, I will say a lot of it is based on somebody who has a monthly cycle.
Mhm.
I also really like to speak into it if that's not something that you identify with in seasons, different seasons, or even different moon phases. So
Mhm.
I think that everybody can find relational pieces in that, whether it's specifically around a menstrual cycle or whatever else cycle feels good in your life. But the concept and the idea of it is for somebody who has a menstrual cycle, we're moving through different hormone levels, different energy levels, different needs from our body, depending on what phase of the cycle we're in. So it's how can you best support yourself? Again, very much identified as female, but somebody with female hormones is not that of somebody with male hormones, where a male's hormone levels are going to cycle, finish the whole cycle every 24 hours, and each day is a fresh space. And for somebody with female hormones, it is a full cycle. It is 23 to whatever, 30, whatever days, but that month of it, we're transitioning. And it came into my awareness actually when I had a few years of dealing with amenorrhea where I didn't have a period. I have had cycles of disordered eating and addiction to exercise, and my body was just not safe to or healthy enough to have a cycle. And as I was really starting to dig into how can I regain my cycle? How can my body start to find balance? This information of cyclical living started to come in. At the time, it was really frustrating to me because I didn't fit that. And I think that's why it's really important for me to speak into find the season that you're in, find the moons, find whatever that is for you. So it doesn't have to be something you can't partake in. And then it was, hey, what foods can I eat to support myself? What ways of movement? That was also a really healing part of my journey, as well as how can I move in a way that is supportive? How can I rest? How can I do aspects of my business or work and put that into it? And for a long time, that was it was, for some reason, breathwork and cyclical living were just two different entities of my life. And I started to get curious about, well, if I move in a different way and if I operate in daily tasks in a different way, and I know that there are some breath patterns that feel more nourishing and allow me to go deeper, and some that add a little bit more intensity and heat, I'm like, why can't I do some supportive patterns to really amplify and support the energy that I'm looking to cultivate, no matter what season or phase of my cycle that I'm in?
That's so cool. So what have you found? What did breath bring to the cyclical living? Did it kind of just amplify where you were and what you already knew? Did it change things? Like, what did that breath do?
I love this. It amplified things and it changed things. So a little bit of both. It allowed there to be an amplification of what my body intuitively knew already. And it allowed there to be an understanding of, oh, when I'm in a ovulation phase, I can stick with a bliss breath or a blow breath, breaths that are a little faster, have a little bit more inherent intensity or heat to them. And why, when I'm in a menstrual phase, I just want to be really slow, really deep, really nourishing. Oh, yeah, my body's asking for something different. So it allowed not only the amplification of and the connection of the wisdom to my body and an understanding, but it also offered changes in, I would get very habitual in the breath patterns that I was doing. And so this was almost just a nice offering of, hey, let's explore something a little bit different here, instead of just by default, which it wasn't not serving me by any means, but by default kind of going into some well-worn patterns. And it really started to open up some play and creativity for me in a practice that I'd used for a few years, and it just at times could feel a little monotonous or just habitual versus interactive or as supportive as it could have been.
Yeah, that feels really intentional to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see that in my own experience, like getting stuck in that pattern of what we do over and over and over again. And some days it feels amazing, and some days it's like, oh, this is awful. And so I see within this an opportunity for self-compassion, even.
So much.
Right.
I think cyclical living can offer a lot of that if you are okay with just figuring it out and not having it to be perfect. There are also times when I was in it that it like needed to be perfect, and I was a little bit too hyper focused on the food I was eating in the minutes. And there's a little bit of that too tight of control. So as long as there can still be the fluidity, it really does offer this space of self-compassion and some grace for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you be willing to speak to cyclical living a little bit more on, like, so I love cyclical living. And so I've been able to seek out and find some people to support me in understanding that. But in conversation, I think there's still a lot of people that really don't understand or even know the basics of what the cycle is, over
Yes.
that like 23 to 33 day period. Can you just do a basic overview of what the cycle is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll connect it to the season as well as the menstrual phase
Beautiful.
cycle. And the moon cycle as well. We can kind of lump everything in together. There's 4 phases in the cycle, and that is your menstrual cycle. We'll start there, the menstrual phase of your cycle, I should say. And that is when you're in a bleed. That's often connected to the same energy as a new moon or winter. And so you just think about the qualities of what those are. It's a new moon is dark. It's very an invitation to go in. If you're in a space that really has a winter season, it is that hibernation mode. It is a space for reflection. I think about having a lot of candlelight and just like the softness. And so in that too, then thinking about how are you moving your body with really gentleness? Maybe it's just deep stretching. Maybe it is taking time off of movement or really minimizing the time that you're moving and just moving because your body's working so hard in that season just to be in the purge and to be in the releasing of that physical and emotional energy that's there. So just really setting yourself up to support in that. And when you think about foods, it's really rich, hearty, warming foods that you can incorporate into your space. The second phase is your follicular phase, or thinking about it as spring. It's things are starting to come. There's a little more livelihood in it. There's this blooming energy. Our hormones are starting to increase back up again, and there just feels this pull to start to create and to start to build and maybe show up with a little bit more vibrancy than we had in a winter phase. And in that, then thinking about, what ways can, when you're talking about movement, perhaps that looks like a little bit more intensity in your movement or a little bit more duration. In business and in conversation, to me, it feels like this space of like deep creation and like, how am I starting to build these things and bring them into fruition? Ovulation or summer or a full moon, it's big. It's vibrant. And also I will speak into the big and the vibrancy, just because those words, I think a lot of times are connected to like, oh, like it's sun and it's warm. Summer can be intense. It can be hot. It can be, so the same way ovulation doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be big and vibrant and feel great. A lot for many, that can also feel like a pretty shift transition in the phase of in that monthly cycle. And so there is this like, can we be in this full expression? Can there be this livelihood? But also a lot of times for many in ovulation, it's also, can we find a balance of grounding down a little bit, of finding some stability? Because there can be a lot of anxiousness or a little bit of untetheredness that can come, especially towards the end of that ovulation phase for many. And then moving into luteal phase or a fall phase. And in that, it's just starting to slow things down a little bit, starting to kind of tidy up, get all your ducks in a row from a work standpoint or day-to-day standpoint. It's making your lists. It's kind of cleaning up any extra areas in your space, kind of really doing everything that you can to prepare for that more inward experience that will come and follow again. And so with that overview of the cycle and in those qualities that those seasons or those phases bring, you can really start to pull the way that your body responds to certain breath patterns or even durations or intensity to match and to either amplify that energy, or especially in ovulation or in late luteal, to help balance and find some stability within self too, to just have a little bit more evenness in expressions or experiences that are happening.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that overview. So with the breath, are you doing breath every day? Like, what is your routine with that?
I do breathe every day for a few moments. Some days it's 4 minutes of just some intentional slowing down and breath work. In the morning, I do like to start my day with at least some time of connected breath. If my schedule allows it, or if I make it a priority, I should probably say, I do like to welcome in a little bit more sustained breath, 10 to 30, 40 minutes of breath later in the day. And that is really where I focus on more specific patterns or a deeper intention versus the morning is just, let's find and connect to your breath so you can find and connect to yourself.
Yeah.
And then let your day go about from there.
Oh, I love that. I love this it is almost like that habitual same thing that you do every morning, but it just opens you up. Okay, what is here? Even in that moment, if you're talking about cyclical living, where am I at in my cycle? Okay, what does my body need? How am I feeling? Like kind of just taking that breath and like, okay, what's here? And, pulling on the knowledge and the mind for what you can measure and know, and then also tuning into the heart of, yeah, what do we need in relation to that energy? And then later in the day, bringing that intentionality to, okay, so this is where I'm at. What would support me later in the day to help me amplify or to lean into whatever it is? Yeah. Does that feel
so much?
similar?
And as you named that, it's actually a drop in for me to connect and to actually ask. As you said that, it felt so truthful because otherwise it is, I get up in the morning and my routine is to go and do movement. And when it is just so habitual, it is just, okay, I'm going to go do this and this is how it's going to go. There's zero space in there for me to say, what is here? What actually would be supportive instead of this is what I do and this is when I do it and this is how I do it. And then to really set that precedence up for the rest of the day to remember this just took a few moments in between calls, in between the other things that I'm doing in my day. Can I pause for a brief moment and check in and possibly recalibrate or possibly just bring awareness to whatever is there? And I think that's a big piece, with when talking about cyclical living and in this space too, it is, yeah, in a perfect world, my schedule could modify week to week and it would be open. And when I was menstruating, I would have no calls. And I'm like, that's not the reality that I live in right now, nor do I think it is for most people for whatever reason it is. And so it is, can I bring in the aspects of this in where I can?
Yes.
Knowing it isn't all or nothing. Or if I ask myself in the morning, hey, what do I need? And I know, but I still override it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. I'm not going to get it perfect all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you that exact question is you have a schedule, you have a job, a corporate job, right? Like you have these things and I know because I see you consistently showing up every week in the same way almost, right? But you are showing up with a different energy week to week, right? And you get to understand that, see that, and honor that and how you're showing up. And so I think cyclical living it is one of those like I have a tendency to be a perfectionist as well. It's one of those things that can be so frustrating because you're like, this works, I can see this makes sense, and my life is not conducive to like the perfect, beautiful cycle, right? And how do you manage that?
It does take a lot of grace. And and honestly, it took me a lot of time in the hyper management of it to say, okay, this isn't working either. We're kind of falling back into patterns that this is actively trying to get me away from, but I'm kind of manipulating this into old ways of being and operating. And just with levity, noticing that about myself of like, okay, that served you really well for a long time. It's not really serving you well anymore. Can we pretend that I don't know everything better than everything else and just try something different? for a while. So there is that murky period of starting it and not getting so critical and nitpicky about it. And then it comes with, and this to anybody listening or anybody practicing this or interested in practicing this, it's every tiny bit is going to add up.
Yes.
Every tiny bit is going to add up. So in a follicular phase, let's say I'm doing nothing that is the thing, but I'm eating some fermented foods. Great. I'm still doing something in that. So even if it's one tiny thing, that's a massive impact versus nothing at all, or
Yeah.
not even having awareness of it at all.
Oh, I have chills as you're saying this. I like to say that I am in cyclical awareness right now.
Yes.
I'm not cyclical living. Like my capacity just isn't there and my knowledge base hasn't been there yet. But what you're saying resonates with me so much. And so I just want to add my testimony, if you will, to that, because this is something I love. It's not every day for me, but if I'm in a funk or I'm just kind of processing something or in just a thoughtful moment, it's okay, where am I at in my cycle? Okay, that makes sense with the energy that I'm in. And especially the foods things, it's been so fun. I grocery shop once a week. That's a pretty routine thing for me. And it's okay, what's one food that I normally wouldn't buy that I can throw in? And it was so fun. It was 2 weeks ago or so that I was on my menstrual phase. And I was shopping in the grocery store and I saw the marinated beets. And I was just never in my life have I ever looked at a beet on the shelf and been I'm going to buy that. I just don't even look at it, right? It's never a thing. And just with the awareness that I've been doing, it catching my eye, and then me kind of I actually don't even know if this is true, but for some reason it sparked something in my head of when we're on our menstrual, there's that beet, that bright red color, right? It just made sense. And I bought it. And every day I just had a beet, and it was the most joyous thing to me. It just felt so intentional. It felt so loving to myself, loving to my body. That's really all I did, right? For the whole menstrual phase, any different than what I normally do. But it just felt nourishing to eat those beets,
Yeah. And can we pull apart what came up in there too was the space of, I don't even know if this is truthful, but for some reason I'm drawn to this food. Beets are catching my eye. I'm just going to grab this and take this instead of, I don't want this to come for people. And I think this is me also speaking into the self of, I don't give a crap what the list is telling you. If your body's, and I think maybe that's this really beautiful part of, I love that cyclical awareness. Can we disregard exactly what the list is telling you need to do? And can you actually honor your cycle? That's the crux of it.
Yeah.
Can you honor yourself to say, I don't know why, but this feels really nourishing to my body today. And I've had a really beautiful conversation with a woman who coaches on this too. And a really great post that she shared was what she does. And she said, I would never coach somebody in this, but this is what happens in my cycle. And it's very opposite from what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it is this space of, I've gained this trust back with my body. I've started to tune in or to listen. And it's saying this, and without having to overthink it so much, I'm just going to go and grab and do this thing.
Yeah. Oh, so good. So I like to think of this in a lot of different aspects of my life, but as you're speaking, I'm feeling this into the cyclical living is the pendulum effect. It's I was over here, I had no awareness, no understanding. I bled and then I didn't, right? It was just clear over here. And then the pendulum had to swing over here to where I was following the list. I was consuming the information. I was reading the books. I was tracking it. I was, getting really nitpicky with the details, almost to a detriment. But in doing that, then I had the information and the base to now, you swing back and forth a little bit, but it feels more to where that intuitive part can come into play, because there's enough of an understanding for me where I trust the impulse. Versus before, without any understanding, I was it was the impulse was so, it didn't make sense. I didn't understand it. I couldn't even tune into there being an impulse. Right. Yeah. And so just that pendulum effect of like having grace when I was over on this side of the pendulum to come back to, all right, now I'm just going to eat the beets when the beets taste good,
Mhm.
you know?
I think that the pendulum example that you just named, Dakota, is so applicable for everything. If you take,
Mm-hmm.
if you're thinking none of this is for me, I don't understand it, I don't know what you're talking about, tune into this space. Wherever it is that you're going, it has been for me so truthful that in most things, I'm on one side of this. I really do have to shift hard to the polar opposite of it. And that can feel so uncomfortable. And then might feel really good. And then it might feel really uncomfortable. But from there, then I've experienced the extremes of it. And I can find a pendulation in the
Mm-hmm.
center somewhere. Never necessarily exactly balanced, or I think that's kind of a impossible thing to ever actually achieve.
Yeah.
But there can be a little harmonious movement or sway.
Mm-hmm.
And for me anyway, it really, no matter what it is, it does come with experiencing the extremes to see then where I get to fall in the center space of that.
Yeah. What, actually, okay, I'm going to ask this question because it's
Yeah.
just kind of fun. I have noticed as my awareness has increased and month after month, I've probably been in my awareness journey of cyclical living for just about a year, probably the beginning of last year. Um, Actually, to be truthful, so the beginning of last year was when I had my first period post being pregnant, nursing, pregnant, nursing. Like I had like 3 or 4 years of basically not having a period, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so at the beginning of that was when I really got to start on this journey. And so now, just this last month, I kind of noticed, and I can't remember all my timelines, but I was on, I think I was like on my period on a full moon. And like I
Mm-hmm.
could feel the conflicting energy. Have you noticed that? And I don't know, can you speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, I think that that can be, I'm so glad that you named it because we talked about it and then didn't kind of address any of that,
Mm-hmm.
just because the menstrual phase of the cycle is those same similar qualities to a new moon doesn't mean that I'm going to sync with a new moon.
Right.
I don't often
Right.
sync with the new moon. Actually, it's the opposite. I do same with the full moon. So there can be this like out of alignment or out of balance space, or to even
Yeah.
think, well, I'm menstruating, but it's summer and I feel the summer energy. Like that feels
Mm-hmm.
out of alignment for me too, right? Or there feels like there's a gap or a disconnect in that.
Yeah.
And that is where it's just the space of, can we really listen to the body and not get so bogged
Mm-hmm.
down in, this is what phase I'm in, this is what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And can there be a little bit of toggling? Can I pull some of whatever I'm feeling drawn to from one energy? And can I also honor the other parts of me that need to be
Mm.
honored in that and harness all of it, or harness a bigger area of the spectrum other than I'm right here and this is how it has to be, or I just have to feel this discomfort of
Mm.
this pull into different directions.
Yeah, and that's the intuitive piece, right?
Yes.
Is that we're not becoming so over rigid to the physiology of the body. We're not becoming so over rigid to the moon cycles and to the seasons, but just that space of flow where I really just want to sit on the couch and be with my body for a minute. And she's hurting and she's bleeding and she's wanting some loving attention, little massage or something, just like gentle touch versus, okay, I'm still bleeding, but I got to get stuff done. Like, even I've got to cook dinner, right? Or like, I've got my kids, right? Like, there's just like something there and it is a full moon or there is the sun or you're just desiring to go out into that energy for whatever reason. So it is like that intuitive piece of being able to honor both, recognize both. So there is even that duality, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're in your job or somewhere where you just have to show up no matter what, if this is the time of day it is, so this is where I've got to be. And so then to feel the duality within that moment of, oh, I really don't want to be here. I hurt. I don't want to be here, but I am here. And just having that awareness, it's hard to articulate, but it's just compassion for me and that grace of like, I'm here, I'm showing up, and that's, I'm doing a good job. Like, I don't need to be over the top. I don't need to be, it's not a season for me to have big ideas. So maybe I don't need to be sharing my big ideas in this meeting because I don't have them. And that's okay, you know?
Mm-hmm. Naming that grace and self-compassion again, and really bringing that in to the spotlight again is the part of it. Is, no, I'm not going to be able to have all of this laid out in the best way. And yes, things actually might feel out of alignment, but instead of beating myself up because, or being confused because why does it, I can just say, wait, understand why there's a pull here, and reality isn't allowing me to just completely sink into that. Okay, I don't have to like it. I don't have to enjoy it. I don't have to embrace the feeling, but I can have an understanding for why there is a little bit of that discord that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just barely getting to the point where I can even name to like my husband. All right, this is the energy I'm in. This is why I'm responding and reacting this way. Just so you know.
Yes.
It's like, it's not even like an apology. It's just like, here, I'm gonna let you be aware too of what I'm aware of. And that has made a tremendous difference in how I feel in our relationship.
That's the part of like, I'm not apologizing because
No.
I get to show up like, I'm not, nor is
Yeah.
this an excuse. However,
Yeah.
this is just how it is.
Yeah. Oh, this is so good. Where would you recommend that people start if they're like into this conversation or embark further onto their journey? Yeah, what would you
Yeah.
recommend?
There's some great books. In the Flow
Mm-hmm.
is one. Oh, I'm blanking on the name, but I can see the pink cover. Elisa Vita does great.
Yep.
I'm like,
In
where
the
is it on
Flow,
my shelf?
Elisa Vita.
Beyond
VB.
the Pill is another really
Oh.
good one that talks about a transition if you're on birth control or if you're staying on. But that's another piece too we didn't mention, and it's not an area of my expertise, but it is, how can you, and that's why you pull in the seasons and the moon is if you're using a birth control pill or other modalities, or you have amenorrhea or for whatever reason, that's not a
You're
space that you're in.
pregnant.
Yes. You can still lean into that and just get curious about what your body needs. Those books are great. They have easy little graphs in them of this is menstrual phase, this is follicular, and you can just find yourself in that. I think in that as well, just starting to track for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't care. There's no perfect way of doing that. I've done really detailed, I've done more vague in that, but just having the awareness for yourself of what day are you on? What symptoms do you have? Do you start to see some patterns that come up? It can also be really supportive in ways that you track to see what went on in the previous month, to see, oh, my bleed feels a lot more intense, or it doesn't feel as intense, or oh, my luteal feels a lot, and like, oh, I've been under a lot of stress this month. Okay, I get it. I can see how that impacts. So you also get to take charge and see a little bit of how your body responds to different pieces, just the more that you gather data to examine and to look through or explore in.
Yeah. That tracking is so huge. Physical symptoms, but also just as emotional places, right? Yeah. I want to add one more book to, and maybe you've read it, especially in the exercise realm, is Roar by Stacey Sims. That's been a really valuable one for me. It's not specifically cyclical living, but it's the female physiology in exercise. And what I especially love about it is it's a pretty small section, but so helpful. She has one on menopause. So menopausal women. And I've just I loved how it's like talking about female physiology. She gets really into and, working with your cycles, but then also honoring and understanding how your body on a physiological level is different post menopause. And that for me I'm not there yet, but I can see how when I make that transition, I'll be so much more empowered, and then shifting to the moon cycle or something to help me with that cyclical living. So that's a great book as well.
Oh, I love that. I haven't read that one, so I'm like getting that
right
to dive into.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Megan. Okay, so I have just a couple quick last questions that are fun. The first one is, where can people find you? How can they work with you? If they can work with you, what does that look like?
Yeah, Instagram's a great space. It is my first and last name. You can come and hang out, connect. Probably the easiest place. All websites and all the things are booked or linked in that too. So it's a great hub. And then working with me looks like there's options for one-on-one containers with more of a somatic mentorship or a somatic coaching, which encompasses breathwork in specific, or any other modalities that there's some interest in, some movement, some maybe some cognitive work, or just a lot of different options under that somatic umbrella. And then there's breathwork sessions as a standalone piece, which is my most favorite, and kind of the place where I really got started. So that's like holds a special place in my heart, but really a place. And if there's questions or curiosities around it, I'm so happy. Shoot me a message and we can just talk about what that looks like for you, or what your journey is, whether it's with cyclical living or just tuning into yourself, tuning into your body, and or whatever is feeling a pull for you in that space.
Yeah, so good. And I mentioned this earlier, but Megan's also one of the breathwork mentors in the Pause program. So I'll put all of these links in the show notes, but if you're interested in the Pause breathwork program, she's also a great resource to
come
connect
hang
with
out.
her.
I hang out there many times throughout the week and I love it. So
yeah,
come
it's so
join.
fun. It's so fun. Yes. Okay. So I'm curious, what are you listening to? Do you have a song on repeat, an album, a genre?
Yeah. I have very different sides of my personality, as I love that most people do.
Yes.
I am listening right now repeatedly to the new Alkaline Trio album. They are my little emo band from forever ago, that if I'm not listening to breathwork tune, it's basically like Trevor Hall or emo. And so that's my repeat. I did not get to see them at a Warped Tour when I was young because I had to leave early, and I'm going to see them in March. So I'm just like reliving my young, more ample concert going days. Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, so good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, and last question. You already shared a couple books, but either what are you currently reading, and it can be in the realm of what we're talking about or not, or what would you recommend to someone that they read? What's been your most favorite?
I am reading again, and it's hitting so differently this time. Eastern Body, Western Mind. No. Let's do it the right way. Yes, Eastern Body, Western Mind. It breaks down the energy centers and how they're formed, how we there is a chapter that I'm voice noting a friend, and it is just, I think this chapter should just be called Meghan Sandve. There's just like so much in it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it brings in such a level of understanding and curiosity, and it's just really ignited something in me. So that is one that, and it brings a lot of awareness and understanding. So very similar to what we've named. It is a space of, oh, I get it. I see. Okay, this makes sense. And that feels really good right now.
That's amazing. There were two things that I was like, I potentially could talk to Megan about. One was cyclical living, which we did. And the other one was chakras and energy centers. So well, that makes perfect sense.
We've hit it all.
We've hit it all.
The only other thing could have been emo music from the early to mid 2000s. So we've hit all of the main pieces that.
Oh my gosh. We got to know Megan. Yeah. That's so good. Yes, all of those things will be linked down in the show notes. And just once again, just a heartfelt thank you to you, Megan, for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you so much. I love this space. So it's been an honor to hang out.